So, the thing is, like I said, if you don't want to be spoiled, skip to the time on the screen now, because there will be some spoilers. Obviously. Um, and the thing is, we will later see in the game, that uh, Gandalf was actually executed. I don't know if it was before Link from Ocarina of Time left for Termina, or if it was meanwhile. But actually, Hyrule did the same thing that they do, that they love to do. They started a war on the Gerudo. You know what, Midna? You are quite the bugger right now. So, um, at least she is distracting me pretty much right now. So the thing is, what happened after Ocarina of Time was that Link, like we saw in the epilogue, did again met up with Zelda, um, and I guess because we already opened the door of time at this point when where Link returned, so it wasn't like get to know her again, but simply returning to her. Um, and of course, we weren't sealed at that point, or Link wasn't sealed at this point, but simply returned like he always did when we traveled back in time. Um, and obviously, somehow caught up with Zelda before Gandalf did stuff. Um, and I assume, but I think it is weird. The whole Ocarina of Time thing is weird um, the Door of Time was open, means that we already met Zelda. But Zelda left Hyrule City and Hyrule Castle before we opened the Door of Time. So time travel stuff is always weird, and I think that's a gap in the logic that the game devs didn't thought about at this point. Uh, but yeah, what happened? Link met up again with Zelda, informed her about stuff. So I assume because we were sent back by the adult Zelda with the Ocarina and not through the Portal of Time, that she must have brought us to a point where Link didn't met Zelda yet. Um, and at least this section here is my theory that the edit Zelda must have sent Link back to a point where they didn't met yet. And maybe she did mean good. Like, hey, if we don't meet, it all will be fine. Like I said, all Zeldas tend to try so hard to get the points that they miss the point, and therefore making dumb decisions. Um, but that has nothing to do with the Rutela theory. Simply, they met up, did go together this time to King Hyrule, informed him about the plans of Ganondorf, and of course, it is all more believable for a king who ignores the thing that every woman in the royal family does have some oracle powers, um, and prophetic dreams and all that. But now that there's a kid from the woods, now it makes all more sense to him. Somehow, like I said, we don't ask about the gap in the logic here. And therefore started a war against the Gerudo. Again. Um, and there are some speculations about how the war went out there. Some say that this was a point where Impa and all trained the Zors to be able to defend themselves, which is why they now have weapons and armor and all that. There's a whole video out there which theorizes about the progress of the war and how all stuff worked out according with picking the hints here and there, which are sprinkled throughout Twilight Princess. And in the end, Ganondorf was executed, not by Zelda and/or Link or anything like that, but by the sages this time. And also a little fun fact here, the Gerudo or the pirate ladies we see in Majora's Mask are actually the Gerudo who left Hyrule after Ganondorf was executed. So not only did ruined Link their entire day in Hyrule, but even in Termina, where they tried to get themselves together as pirates. So he ruined their day twice. So, or even a third time, if you consider that without Link, there wouldn't have been a war where Gandalf were executed. But we will also see the sequence where Gandalf is executed, or presumably tried to be executed by the sages. And due to the Triforce of Power, he is able to survive actually and kills the Sage of Water. And at this point, we do know that Wuto was actually the Sage of Water, which makes me double sad, to be honest. And if you consider the timing that happened, Wuto was actually a child back then. And of course you could argue, but Marou, the sages in Twilight Princess are all this same-looking monk-like figurines. I do think that is something like a mask or something like that, in terms of protecting their identities and what do I know, and insert some stuff which would be a good reason for them to disguise themselves during an open execution. And not only it was simply just an execution in the Citadel of Time, no, this one was destroyed. We will come to that point later, because we will find the ruins of the old city of Hyrule. And the thing is here, the Hylians didn't stop by like, hey, let's capture, you know what, let's capture Gandalf, execute him, and voila, problem solved. No, the Hylians wouldn't be the Hylians if they still wouldn't be a bunch of racist people. And taking their chance in degrading and all that, the Gerudo and all that. I don't know the word. I have in my head here. Not belittling, but simply spitting on the culture of and their stuff with actions, not literally. The Colosseum we will see in the game was actually a sacred ground to the Gerudo. Just like, I don't think that it was actually the Desert Colossus, but simply another holy place in the desert. Or maybe it was. We don't know. And the thing is, you will see a bunch of dead and revived necromantic-like Hylian soldiers, which is a clear hint that the war went there and all that. And Ganondorf was actually executed in this Colosseum. So he was executed in one of the holy places of their people, after they attacked his people again. But if you watched my Ocarina of Time Let's Play, you do know my opinion. I'm Team Gandalf here. And my theory is that he understandably hates the Hylians for terrorizing his people over generations, and generations, and Demise simply fuels that hate that already exists in him, which makes him a pretty perfect vessel for Demise. Because we all do know not every Gandalf is the vessel of Demise. There are other villains out there who were actually also willing vessels for Demise. But let's do not go astray so far here. So why I do not go along with the theory which I do now mention is because, in my opinion, because we do know that Twilight Princess originates from Ocarina of Time in the timeline, and that the execution of Gandalf must have happened somewhere in between Link arriving at the coast in Termina and arriving in Termina General, or leaving for Termina. So he was a child back then, and we do know that all the females in the royal family of the Zoras are the sages of water. And we do know that Voodoo's mom must have been dead at this point already. Of course, she could have simply been at the water temple and not being present at Zora's domain at this point, and maybe would have been killed when Gandalf summoned the Dark World, which didn't happen in this world of the timeline. So it was either Voodoo or Voodoo's mom at this point. And for this theory, I do now explain there has to be it. I get. I think that this simply goes the route where Voodoo's mom was still the Sage of Water. And this theory does say, actually, that Rutela, I was thinking about the English name for a second, that Rutela is actually Ruto, because we do know that Zoras live much, 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 much longer than Hylians do, and Gorns, they're almost immortal. I mean, they're half stones. But we do know that Zoras are actually really, 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 really on the long side of a lifespan. Let's take Sidon for an example. Link does meet Sidon as a young little fella, actually almost a mute kid. And 100 years later, he is somewhat in the age, actually, where he could marry. And we do know from Tears of the Kingdom that he will marry during the events of Tears of the Kingdom. So he is also, after 100, he is not that old for Zora. And 100 years are 2 generations, actually, if we take a Hylian lifespan, or a human lifespan. And Rutela was mentioning that she was not only the queen, but one of the elders of the Zoras. So she was goddamn old. And the other thing is, so in terms of age, it could be possible that Rutela is actually Ruto. If we go along with the thought that at the point of Gandalf's execution, her mother was still the present Sage of Water. And therefore, her mom was killed during the execution and not Wutu herself. Um, Still, I totally go along with the fact that those identical appearances of the sage in Twilight Princess are simply disguises or mask which hides literally hides their faces. Um, and because the other thing is where the theory connects is Wallace does actually talk a lot about his mom, so Queen Rutela, but never about his father, or almost never. And Rutela also, as we already got hinted, does give Link the Zoa armor. Again. um, and she mentions that her late husband crafted this armor thingy for a hero. So, but the thing here is, why should he expect the hero in somewhere in the future be a Hylian? Of course, you could argue with the hero of time and all that, and thinking about, but yeah, what is if he returns and all that. But it's not the closest thing. And of course, here comes the point with Breath of the Wild lore. We do know that if we take Breath of the Wild in consideration, that Zoas craft armors for those they swear to marry, or at least it's like a love commitment for them, or somewhat of a betrothal ring. Um, and so, and we do know that Wutu swore her love with the Zoa Sapphire towards Link. And as we do know from Ocarina of Time, she is pretty loyal and takes that stuff really seriously. Because the whole 7 years where he was simply not there and shit was going down, she didn't take another Zoa or at least any other guy as a fiance or husband or mate or whatever Zoas call it. And so it would be more likely actually for Wudu to craft an armor which is Hylian sized. Or even made for a Hylian. And she also doesn't really talk about her husband, and you don't see his spirit anywhere, and he is totally not present. Not and where everybody is talking about Rutela, Wallace is talking about her, mentioning her, remembering her, thinking about her, even mourning her more than his, at her grave than his dad and all that. And also still always talking about her. So not even in dialogue, the King Zoa is present here. And also it would have made, if we stick with the King Zoa made the armor for Hylian, still the King Zoa who did know Link, the fiance of his daughter, it would have been more likely for him to finish a Hylian-sized armor. So either way around, well, and so now there of course comes the question, but Marou, if Rutela is Wuto, and Wuto stayed faithful to Link, how could it be that Wallace is her son? Or that she even has a kid? Adoption. Not that she adopted some kind of Zoa kid. I mean, it could have been possible. Totally. But the theory I've heard goes more along with that King Soa married again, had a son, and all that. And that Ruto simply took her brother into her care after King Soa died, and something like that. And there are a lot of parents who adopt and simply totally say rightfully that their adopted child is their child. They don't say, "Yeah, that's my adopted son." They say, "This is my son." And I also think, considering a kid your own child doesn't need to be blood related. It is a thing about feelings and love and dedication and wanting to nurture and care for this kid and all that. If you love this kid as your own kid, then you're his parent, in my opinion. Of course, there is this legal stuff going on and all that, but in my opinion, it is a thing about feelings and emotions and a bond that is formed, and not about what blood relation or anything like that. So um, yeah, so it is totally possible to say, yeah, maybe his sister Wuto simply took him, adopted him after King Zoa died and all that. And she accepted him as her son from that point, and maybe simply had motherly feelings for him. And maybe, as he is still very, very young, didn't even know that Udo was his sister, and yeah, simply thinks that she is his mother, or at least considers her as his mother. Um, and the next steps down in the theory is um, you saw all the Twilight Zones, and actually nobody was killed. Um, And in Gandalf's execution, it was the Sage of Water, who wanted or tried, or actually even actually did gave him the final blow with his sword. Was the Sage of Water. So of course, Gandalf has a pretty good reason to kill the Sage of Water at this point, and not simply any other sage. Um, but now we have the point, because Santo is somewhat of a pawn of Gandalf at this point. Um, and while Gandalf is sitting around in the Twilight Realm somewhere, somehow. Um, so the thing here is that uh, 1 second, I have to take a sip of my drink. So, um, his pawns only summoned the Twilight, or the Santos of Pawn, the pawns of Santo, uh, who is somewhat of a pawn to Gandalf at this point. Um, Only summoned the Twilight and kidnapped. They didn't kill anybody. They simply terrorized and kidnapped and all that. Um, but Queen Rutela was actually executed. As an, I don't know how the English word for it is, but as she said it, as a message to her people. And if you consider how everything went at the other folks and races and kingdoms, um, that's the only one where that was taken as a measure. And it would have made sense if you consider, yeah, Gandalf has a pretty big grudge against the Sage of Spirit, the Sage of Spirits, the Sage of Water. Um, and as we do know that all the females of the royal family are the Sages of Water, at this point, Rutela and or Ruto is the Sage of Water, or the new Sage of Water. And simply also personal crutch for the execution thing, but also taken as a measure that she can't replace the other Sage of Water, which is dead. Um, so yeah. Um, that's the theory for it. It is not my own theory. It is one of many that I heard in doing a lore video and theory video about Zelda. I do think the theory is really interesting, but I don't really go along with it. Um, I mean, it has pretty good points. I also do think that the execution thing was simply out of personal grudge. Because, yeah, the final blow of the Sage of Spirits and the Sage of Water. I don't know what I do have with Sage of Spirits here. Um, and yeah. Um, like I said, it has pretty valid points. But I don't really go along with that theory, to be honest. I appreciate the theory. I do think I do think it is pretty cool. But nah, I simply don't feel the theory at least. Um, oh, I'm sorry. Um, I do think it is more likely actually that so sad that it is that Wuto was actually already the present Sage of Water in Ocarina of Time already at the kid point because she was tending to Lord Jabu Jabu and not her mom and all that. So she was pretty dedicated and pretty busy. And tending or tending to the patriarch entity thingy sounds like a sage duty to me. Um, and yeah, I also think I can be wrong here, but I do think that her mom isn't even mentioned or even mentions that she is already passed. Um, but I'm not sure here. Um, so I think it is more likely. I don't think that it is not possible that her mom was the Sage of Water at this point. And we simply didn't met her because she was in the Temple of Water, obviously. And Voodoo simply took on some duty which doesn't involve the temple itself. And it was simply like a novice duty, you could say. So it is totally possible that her mom was killed as a Sage of Water in the sequence. But I do think it is more likely than the theory that I explained is that Voodoo was already the Sage of Water, and sadly enough, although she was a child, killed by Gandalf during the execution. Which is double sad because, of course, Link didn't have the same feelings for her like she did for him, but you can't deny that they were close as friends. Um, so yeah, double sad. And yeah, but so much for the timestamp. Simply skip the video if you want to avoid spoilers. um, but like always, let me hear your opinions on the theory, on the voodoo thing, on the execution thing, and the whole other stuff. Let's again, let's talk about it in the comments. Oh, will still be pretty slow when it comes to answering those comments during real life stuff and all that. I do hope I do pre-record, of course, against some stuff, so I do hope it will work out like that now from now on until it is all done and settled. So yeah, but still, I'm eager. I'm like always. I'm really eager to hear your opinions on that topic. So yeah, see you next time. Bye.